Hello and welcome to Ohio Political News Morning Update. I'm Timothy Shea sitting in for Joe Miller. The big news overnight, it looks as though we've averted a shutdown. President Trump and Chuck Schumer have agreed in principle to bifurcate the 6 spending bills that are needed to prevent a shutdown when funding expires on January 30th. The Senate will vote on 5 of the bills via unanimous consent, so fingers crossed that we don't have one rogue senator yelling nay. And then the DHS bill is just going to be a 2-week stopgap so that the president and Senator Schumer can negotiate the parameters at which the Democrats will agree to fund ICE. There are 2 big problems with this entire situation. First, why are we continuing to govern via continuing resolution? CRs are a stopgap, and yet they have been the rule for the past umpteen years. This must end. I believe the president has a larger vision that we're going to get back to passing budgets and abiding by them once A, we doge all the corruption out of the federal government, B, we prosecute all of the corrupt House and Senate members who have been gorging themselves at the federal trough, and C, that the tariffs kick in and are going to be an alternate source of revenue. It's a lot easier to pass a budget when you have the money to do the things that you want to do, when you're not going to do many of the things that you used to do, and when you don't have to look for tax increases in order to pass a spending bill. I believe that's the vision. We will see. The second problem is, why does Chuck Schumer have any say whatsoever? Because Leader Thune is a Republican who won't nuke the filibuster. The biggest question facing our republic is, why are Republicans unwilling to even approach the levers of power, much less grasp them, much less pull them? The Democrats don't have such compunction. You know that if the Democrats win the midterm elections, if they take the Senate, the filibuster is gone. G-O-N-E, gone. They will nuke it on day 1. So why aren't the Republicans? We also know that they will impeach President Trump for a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and even 10th time. Why haven't any of these rogue judges been impeached? The whole thing is perplexing at best. All we can do is watch, keep an eagle eye, mind what they're doing. I do believe that larger forces are in play. I think we've seen tremendous activity the past week with all of the corruption in Minnesota being exposed, Ilhan Omar's personal corruption being exposed. Oh, and by the way, that mystery fluid that the attacker sprayed on her sweater, on her chest, that turned out to be apple cider vinegar. Now, why apple cider vinegar? Well, if it was just water, they wouldn't be able to say it was an acid attack, now would they? That's right. Apple cider vinegar is acetic acid. It's the weakest of the acids, and yet it is still an acid. So you just know that their plan before it was exposed as a Jussie Smollett hoax was to claim that she had been the victim of an acid attack. Well, Ilhan, I know you Somalis don't have exactly the highest intelligence level. Average IQ, I believe, is 68, which qualifies as mental retardation due to all the inbreeding. I guess that's what happens when you marry your brother. But nodding at your attacker as to when he should attack you after you pause in a speech, that's not going to work. Also, reacting immediately and following the attacker and not being like, oh my gosh, what just happened? You couldn't even fake it well. Jiffy Pop Top. You got to go home. We need you denaturalized and deported, along with your brother and the rest of your warlord terrorist family. That's right. The Ilhan Omar family, and by the way, that's not her real name. You can Google what her real name is. Hint, it's her brother's name. They were the ones people were fleeing. Okay, they weren't refugees. They were the reason that the Somalis that did seek asylum were seeking asylum. Her family is corrupt to the core going back generations. We need to bounce her butt back to Somalia. It'd be good for Minnesota, good for the country, and quite frankly, probably good for Somalia. She'll run a telephone scam over there. I mean, what do you expect from a group of people whose only national industry is piracy? The only thing the Somalis have ever been able to figure out how to do is pirate ships that pass by their rather lengthy shoreline. They're strategically positioned there, and they pirate. Just look at Captain Phillips. That's who the Somalis are. Okay? These are not fine, upstanding citizens. These aren't people who came here with a dream to be Americans and to make this a better, stronger, and more prosperous country. No, they're a bunch of grifting thieves who came here to fleece the idiots. And yes, that's right. We're the idiots. All these leftists voting to protect rapists, voting to protect murderers, out on the streets to protect rapists and murderers, assaulting federal law enforcement agents. Oh, and by the way, did you notice that Democrats suddenly aren't in favor of police wearing body cams? After George Floyd, it was all, police need to wear body cams. And now that the body cams are showing what domestic terrorists these protesters are, so organic with their pre-printed signs and fat paychecks, that now the Democrats are like, no, body cams are racist. We can have body cams. Body cams are violation of privacy. It's just, you can't make this stuff up. These are some of the lowest IQ individuals in the history of ever. But they're a threat nonetheless, because what's going on now is a color revolution. Just like CIA ran a color revolution in Ukraine and in Georgia and elsewhere in Eastern Europe, in Africa, and around the globe. Make no mistake, what's being done here is a color revolution. Okay, violent protests in the streets. They're looking to trigger another Maidan massacre. And then challenges to the government's legitimacy. It's right out of the color revolution handbook. I mean, it's at this point, anybody that doesn't see it needs a seeing eye dog. Okay. So it looks like we're going to have another series of CRs to keep the government open for who knows how long. I guess September, maybe. We'll see. We need a budget, and we need Republicans to start getting comfortable with the fact that they are in control. We gave them majorities in the House and the Senate. They need to start acting like it. In other news, President Trump announced that he will likely name a new Federal Reserve chairman today. He announced it last night at Melania's red carpet opening of the wonderful movie Melania. I strongly encourage everyone who can to see it in the theaters. Give her a big opening weekend. That's the only thing Hollywood listens to. And what a beautiful FU to Hollywood it would be if Melania opened huge. Los Angeles is up to its old tricks, though, with regard to the movie Melania. They took a significant chunk of change to plaster Melania promo posters on bus stops and buses. And I'm not sure about the bus stops, but 100 buses were suddenly taken out of service and sent to a repair yard. There's going to be a contract violation and guaranteed to be a lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles for breach of contract. The president is also suing the IRS for $10 billion for illegally releasing his tax information. I hope he gets $20 billion. Actually, let's make that treble damages for willfulness. Let's give him $30 billion. And yeah, taxpayer money, don't care. Not when Somalis are stealing trillions. If Somalis are stealing trillions for the Democrats, well, give the president $30 billion for the crime that was committed by violating his privacy rights by the IRS. Lois Lerner, remember her? All the criminals are manic and in a panic. John Brennan, Eric Clapper, all of them. They know that the jig is up. They've got the documents with Obama's signature on them. Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Obama, and yes, Sleepy Joe himself, the most corrupt politician to ever hold the office of president, at least the most corrupt American citizen to ever hold the office of president. It's all coming to a head all at once. All these ICE protests, they're only in Democrat states. They're only in sanctuary cities. Why is that? Why are cities that have 10 times the population of Minneapolis experiencing precisely zero violence? Because this isn't on the merits. This isn't substantive. Okay, today it's ICE. A couple weeks ago it was, this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't matter what the issue is. They don't care. They don't care about Laken Riley and Miss Nungery and all the women raped and killed by illegals. They don't even care about the illegals. It's just a power politics issue for them. That's all it is. It's a wedge issue. They don't care what the issue is. They'll move on to the next issue once this one fizzles out. This is what Saul Alinsky wrote about in Rules for Radicals. And mind you, who he dedicated that book to. That's right, Lucifer. These people are demonic. They are evil. They do want the destruction of our country. They want the Constitution shredded. Basically, every single thing they accuse President Trump and MAGA Republicans of being and doing, being Nazis, being fascists, shredding the Constitution, creating an insurrection, that's all the stuff they are. And that's all the stuff they're doing. Okay? It's Projection 101. That's the name of the game for these leftists. And they need to be shut down. They need to be shut down hard. I've been strongly in favor all week long of using water cannon on them. A water cannon at 15 degrees below zero will get your attention. We need to clear the streets. Congress needs to act. Let's pass a 250-foot restraining area. You can't get closer. You can film, you can protest, you can do whatever you want, not within 250 feet of a federal enforcement action. Why hasn't Congress acted on that? Let's go. Let's get some legislation. I'm not a big fan of legislation, passing legislation. I think one of the worst metrics for a politician is how many bills he or she has gotten passed. In this instance, we need some federal legislation. We need the SAVE Act. We need a 250-foot perimeter for federal law enforcement actions. We need a budget. We need the Congress to start acting like it's got the power we gave it last November. Now, in world news, there was some interesting developments. President Putin came out and said that he hopes that Israel and the United States preserve the integrity of Iran's nuclear reactor, the electricity generating reactor that, by the way, Russia sold it. Because if that integrity is not maintained, we're looking at a Chernobyl type event, and nobody wants that in the great, once and future great country of Persia. But why did he come out and say that he hopes that the United States and Israel maintain the integrity? Oh, and why was an Iranian government plane spotted departing Tehran for Moscow last night? Was the Ayatollah Kaboumi on it? Has the Ayatollah defected to Russia? We don't know yet, but keep an eye on what's going over there. The Iranian people are rising up. They've suffered massacres until the president sent a very clear message to the Ayatollah that if any more protesters are killed, that serious consequences will ensue. And it was made clear what those serious consequences were. I have been waiting for the Iranian people to throw off the shackles of their Muslim overlords for 47 years now. It's the satanic, demonic political system. It's not a religion. Allah is Satan, the father of lies, the deceiver, the enemy. Muhammad was a pedophile warlord The Quran was deleted and rewritten so many times, nobody knows even what it originally said. The people that are upset when it gets burned don't even know what's in it. All these Muslims out in the street, you see them quizzed on YouTube, they don't even know what the Quran says. By the way, the Quran says that the Jewish people are to live peacefully in the land of Israel. Funny, I think most Muslims miss that memo, but that's what the Quran actually says. Amidst all its calling for striking them at their neck, beheading people, killing them wherever you find them, anyone that isn't Muslim. It's a scourge on the planet. It needs to be kicked out of Western Europe. It needs to be kicked out of the United States. It needs to be kicked out of Canada. Japan's kicking it out. The new Prime Minister, Takaichi in Japan, is kicking Islam out. It needs to be kicked out of Western civilization, Eastern civilization, and the planet. It's time to delete Islam from the planet. Now, it doesn't mean all Muslims, but it does mean the ideology. Marxism, Leninism, and Muslimism needs to be deleted. This red-green alliance needs to be defeated once and for all. It's literally the force of Satan trying to overtake the world. I think it's the dying gasp of the father of lies, the prince of lies, the ruler of this earth. Jesus never said that Satan didn't have the power to grant all the wishes with which he tempted our Lord after the 40 days in the desert. Now, Jesus never said, you don't have the power to give me all these kingdoms. You don't have the power to do this, that, or the other thing with which you tempted me. No, he acknowledged his power because Satan is the ruler of this world until he won't be. And that's going to be the biggest plot twist in history. What else is going on? Let's take a look at the headlines. Melania got $25 million investment secured for housing support for youths transitioning out of foster care. This is really important. Children are stuck in the foster care system until they're 18 years old, and then they're just kicked out. What's an 18-year-old going to do today? Right? Likely a very poor education received, likely very poor, if any, job training received. And now all of a sudden at 18, you've got to suddenly come up with rent. Rents are outrageous. Home prices, forget about that. So the First Lady has secured a $25 million investment into a program that is going to help young people transition out of foster care. And I think that's fabulous. It shows what care she has for the young people of our nation. Who doesn't have the best interests of our young people, our children at heart? Well, it looks like a lot of pediatricians. A lot of pediatricians are getting $1 million a year to promote vaccines. That's right, $1 million a year. They say that, pediatrics is the least well compensated area of medicine. Well, that's true. If you look at the salary, pediatricians don't make a lot of money. But if they're getting $1 million to push the big pharma poison, and if they're firing patients that refuse to take the jab, which happens, I think we need a re-evaluation of our entire medical industry. These organizations, the far left organizations, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, like the American Medical Association, the American Bar Association for that matter, the left has infiltrated and taken over all of our institutions. We have a ridiculous number of nonprofit organizations in this country. I think we need to reform the tax code. And again, maybe we're going to not have a tax code. Maybe the tariffs will take care of that. And we won't need NGOs. Wouldn't that be an ancillary benefit? I just thought of this. Wouldn't it be a great ancillary benefit of doing away with, repealing 13 or 16A, getting rid of the income tax, doing away with the IRS? That would do away with nonprofit status. How would they get their money then? USAID is shut down. I guess Bill Gates will just have to pay Pay, pay. George Soros will just have to pay, 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 and not get any tax break. The fact that taxpayer dollars are being used to fund insurrection in Minneapolis and elsewhere around the country is just absolutely obscene. We need to end this practice. We need to end it now. And maybe there's a better future tomorrow, thanks to the tariffs. One thing we know for certain, everything we were told about the tariffs was wrong. I'm going to be charitable and say that they erred. They were mistaken. They didn't see things as clearly as they perhaps could have. Now, they outright lied, and we all know they lied. We all knew the tariffs would work, and we knew why the tariffs would work. And sure enough, the tariffs are working. The steel industry is coming back to America. All the strategic industries are coming back to America. And yes, we're America first, but we want Australia to be independent and be able to stand on its own 2 feet, not be dependent on China and India. We want China and India to do well. China's economy is in the dumper. Okay, it's not doing well over there. And I think regime change in China might be on the table a little bit down the road. I think the Chinese people, if they could throw off the Chinese Communist Party, that country would absolutely explode with entrepreneurship and technological advances. The Chinese people are incredibly industrious. If I were to choose one word to describe every Chinese I've known, it would be industrious. They are some of the hardest working people on the planet. And yes, most of the technology that they have, they stole from us, but that doesn't mean they're not capable of developing their own. They've developed a lot of great technology, educated here at our universities. I think Ohio State has something like 20,000 Chinese nationals. That's another issue we need to address, is all the communist Red Army infiltrators we've got at Ohio State and elsewhere in the country. These student visas need to end. Why are we giving foreign students preferential admission over homegrown American kids? We need to reform everything. This entire country is one problem after another. And quite frankly, the only man I see that's capable of making any progress in any of these areas, much less in all these areas, is President Trump. The man's a machine. He sleeps like 4.5 hours a night. He's 79 years old and he's running circles around his entire cabinet. Marco Rubio said that he puts a blanket over his head so when the president walks by on Air Force One, he thinks it's just some random staffer bagging a couple Z's and not his Secretary of State. Because if he knew it were Marco, he'd wake him up and say, Marco, let's go. We got to work. Got to do. The president's an absolute machine. He has thought about what he was going to do in this administration for 45 years. He's thought about this since Rona Barrett asked him in 1980 whether he would ever consider running for president. He knows what he's going to do with regard to the Fed fiat slave system that they've locked us into. He knows what he's going to do with foreign policy, with the Don Rowe doctrine, making the Western Hemisphere our neighborhood. And unlike previous administrations, instead of using South America, Mexico, and yes, even Canada as puppets to do our bidding, no, the president's vision is a rising tide lifts all boats. He wants every country in the Western Hemisphere to be prosperous. Okay, that's what his vision is. He's not a fascist. He's not a Nazi. He's not Hitler. He's not destroying our nation. He's not shredding the Constitution. I think he and President Milei in Argentina, and if we can get President Bolsonaro out of prison in Brazil, and finally have secure elections, not only here in the United States, but also in other countries, because the election was rigged in Brazil. And the first thing they did was put Bolsonaro in prison. Lula needs to go. He is one of the cartel's boys right out of the favela, and he's a criminal. The president of Brazil is a flat-out criminal. Rick Grenell was recently down there. Why was the head of the Trump Kennedy Center going down for a meeting on the border of Brazil and Venezuela. I think there's going to be a lot that's going to happen before July 4th. We've already seen a tremendous amount, despite all of the distraction that the left has put up in Minneapolis. I think the president's using it to occupy the news cycle while an awful lot is being done behind the scenes. I think we are in for great times. I can't wait for the State of the Union in a couple weeks. Go see Melania this weekend if you can. Give her a big weekend. Take your friends, take your family. That's a movie that's worth spending the money to go see. Even the $95 box of popcorn and the $127 tub of Coke would be worth it this weekend. I'll give you a pass for this weekend only, all right? That's it for today's Ohio Political News Morning Update. I'm Timothy Shea, sitting in for Joe Miller. Until next time, God bless you. God bless these United States.